The number one team in the country ends their non-conference slate with a 51-3 victory over Louisiana Monroe at home.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Tony Monk joining me from Spot On Sports again for another Monday. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, first, the Louisiana Monroe game reactions. In the second segment, players of the game. And then in the third segment, my Heisman rankings going into week 5 of the college football season. Week 5 of the college football season. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I apologize to the fans, watching on YouTube and listening on audio. If we seem a little bit somber, right, talking about a 51-3 victory between Texas and ULM, is because me and Tony are both Cowboys fans, and we happen to just be recording this right after the Cowboys put up a valiant effort for no reason just to lose to the Baltimore Ravens after being down 28-6. So we'll try our best to be excited. We'll try our best to do this with a smile on our face. But, we are disappointed Cowboys fans talking about the Longhorns, the number one team in the country. So, my reactions to Texas ending their, non-conference slate with a dominant, 51-3 victory is playing quarterback is hard. Right. You can be a 5-star. You can be one of the highest graded players ever. You can be a Manning. You can be playing against ULM and you can still come in and struggle. Right. Because this is, arguably the most important position in sports. And it's a really hard position to play. We saw a lot of elite traits from Arch Manning. Right. We saw why he was, arguably the number one quarterback in his class, the deep ball, the athleticism, that we've seen the last couple of weeks. We saw a lot of elite traits from Arch Manning on Saturday against ULM, while also seeing how a lack of experience can affect a young quarterback, especially in his first start. And I thought Steve Sarkisian did a really good job of keeping it simple for Arch Manning. I know a lot of people are going to say, like, oh, he was just letting, Arch sling it all over the yard. And there were a lot of deep balls. And, whether those were, called specifically or Arch was just letting it fly, we'll never know. Right. That's between, Steve Sarkisian and everybody that's in the meeting room. But what I noticed was, first of all, we ran the ball a ton. I mean, I'm not sure if Jaydon Blue's ever had 25, carries in his career in a game. And then it felt like, especially in the first quarter, maybe even in the first half, almost every pass Arch threw was either an RPO or play action, right? It felt like everything that Arch was doing was coming off faking the, the ball to the running back and then, throwing the ball down the field. So I thought, Steve Sarkisian did a really good job of a young quarterback in his first start, really, kind of predicating everything off the run game and making it simple, making it easy for Steve Sarkisian made it easy for Arch Manning in terms of his reads. And when you talk about those elite traits, right, and, the deep ball really is what, probably stood out to everybody when you're watching Arch Manning. The big, 56-yarder to Isaiah Bond was an elite throw. The one to Silas Bolden, which was questionable, whether it was a catch or not, that one was called back. But I thought that was a really good throw, right? It wasn't necessarily in the bucket, but he put it to where Silas Bolden could go get it. And then a big 46-yarder down the field to Matthew Golden. So we saw some elite deep throws from Arch Manning in this game down the field to the wide receivers. But we also saw, like I said, a young quarterback in his first start, a lack of experience, a lot of staring down wide receivers, right? A lot of not getting off his first read, inaccurate throws, some high throws, some throws that were too hot that led to stalled drives and turnovers. He did have 2 interceptions in this game against ULM. Arch completed 52% of his passes in this game against Louisiana Monroe. Coming into the game, Louisiana Monroe was allowing a 75% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks. So once again, Louisiana Monroe was allowing 75% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks. Arch only completed 52% of his passes in his first start. And what I want to say is the infrastructure around a young quarterback matters, right? It didn't matter that Arch turned the ball over twice in this game. It didn't matter that Arch only completed 52% of his passes. Of course, it's ULM, right? But when you have an elite running game, an elite offensive line, an elite defense, an elite play caller, right? You surround a young quarterback with that great infrastructure, and he's still able to thrive while also making mistakes. We see the same thing with Tennessee, a top 5 team in the country, right? When Nico Iamaleava, right? Elite play caller, elite running game, elite offensive line, elite defense, and you can allow him to make mistakes because he has a great infrastructure around him. Then you look at Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold, where they don't have that, and they're asking Jackson Arnold to go out there and carry the team. He plays a team like Tennessee and gets benched, right? The infrastructure around a young quarterback matters, and we have an amazing infrastructure around a young quarterback in Arch Manning. My second takeaway, I'm gonna try to go through this really quickly. I know I'm taking up some of Tony's time, but this
No,
pass
go ahead.
defense looks elite, but it may not be tested all year, right? Right now, this Texas pass defense, seventh in yards per game allowed, second in yards per attempt allowed, right? So they've been elite through the first 4 games. Now let's look at the rest of the schedule. Mississippi State, starting quarterback Blake Shapen out for the year. Oklahoma just benched Jackson Arnold, their starting quarterback. Georgia, passing offenses look pedestrian. Carson Beck only 160 yards against Kentucky over 4 quarters. Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia has been solid thus far, and they almost beat Missouri, but Vanderbilt does not have an elite passing offense by any means. Florida has 2 quarterbacks, which means they have none, but those 2 quarterbacks have 8 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions through 4 games. Arkansas, Taylon Green only completes 54% of his passes and has an interception for every touchdown he's thrown this year. Kentucky, Brock Vandagriff, former 5-star, recruit that went to Georgia and now at Kentucky, 86th in the country in QBR. And then Texas A&M, as of right now, Connor Weigman is injured. I think he has a shoulder injury, and they're playing their backup. But even when Connor Weigman was healthy, they don't have a single pass catcher that can threaten you. So this has been an elite passing offense that may not be tested until they get to the SEC championship game or they get to the playoffs. Because like I said, when you look at every team on the schedule coming up, even in the SEC slate, they all have question marks about their passing attack. But nonetheless, like I said, a good start for Arch Manning in his first game. Definitely got to clean some things up, but that just comes with experience. And then the passing defense continued to show that they were elite, and they look like they'll be elite for the remainder of the season because they're not going to have much competition in that regard. Tony, what were your takeaways?
Well, when I look at a team, John, that had 497 yards of offense on that day, and I started thinking about how much fun it was actually going to be to get on the show and start breaking down what we loved and what we didn't love about what this offense was able to do. And obviously, we said before the show it was going to be super quarterback heavy because we were introduced to a full slated game with Arch Manning. And aside from the bad start that he had with the interception, again, bad decision, kind of a bad throw, we got to understand that, all right, Arch isn't the robot that we spoke about him not being last week. And then the fact that I wondered, what's the rhythm for Arch kind of going to be, once he does take the reins. We look at a guy like Quinn Ewers, and Quinn has a rhythm, right? You come on and play action pass, you got your RPO, it's boom, 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 balls out. But when you look at Arch, there's like a low, and you said it earlier, I wondered if the game plan here was to take a lot of shots. Hey, do we want deep progression here? Or was this kind of Arch's thing, kind of being that young gunner? He's got the gunslinger mentality, the Manning blood, it's all in him. Or was this a thing that Sark wanted to do because it was UL Monroe? Again, we'll never know. But this, this offense took 10 passes of 20 yards downfield, John. Ewers had never done that in his career in a game for Texas. And so I'm starting to say, hey, did we really look at a different identity today with what Texas could be? And obviously the receivers did a thing. We don't have to talk about Ryan Wingo's emergence, even though he's coming into his own, what Isaiah Bond was able to do, and Golden and Bowden and all those guys. But just this vertical passing game that we were just really introduced to yesterday. Yeah, I thought that was just a super crazy thing to see. Big shout out to Jaydon Blue. He was just in the walking boot last week, and he comes back, and we realized a complete back yesterday in terms of trying to catch the ball out the backfield, and as well as running it. Jaydon Blue runs for over 120 yards and has 4 total touchdowns. And then I think it was a good caveat that he was getting more so involved in that third quarter when Texas offense started to look a little stagnant after Arch wasn't kind of able to produce much in the passing game. And it speaks back to him having to just settle in, right? The game and the nuances of the game is always going to change. It doesn't matter if it's UL Monroe or if it's a great team like Georgia. They're going to challenge you in some aspects. UL Monroe didn't come out there and stand still yesterday. They kind of made it a little hard on him in some instances. But I think if they are able to cut down on how erratic Manny could be at times, again, is it just because he's an athlete, he can make the throws, or is it because, hey, he's this young guy that's just trying to take those shots early, and you want to get the big play instead of just taking what a defense actually gives you at those times? One of the other things I really loved was how this defense played, and much like you were talking about who's going to be able to challenge the offense this year, who's going to be there to challenge this defense? those same questions kind of arise because when you look down their schedule and you just say with Oklahoma benching their quarterback, and Georgia's not mostly known to be an offensive team. I'm starting to wonder if this Texas defense is the best defense in college football right now. They've
Yeah,
allowed about 4 less touchdowns in 4 games that they played. And I can't see anybody having to make this team work hard. And then on top of that, despite them playing lesser competition or what we think somebody should be challenging this team defensively, they're playing and they're finishing, right? That's the best thing about this defense. The attitude, the maturity level is different than it was last year. We're not even dealing with the same big names on this team. So those are a lot of things that I just really saw. You took a lot of it, John. You took a lot of it, obviously, with the whole Arch Manning bit. But those are the takeaways that I have as far as this game.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. When you talk about, like Arch Manning and, maybe what the future could look like with him at the quarterback position. That's what we saw a lot of at Alabama, right? With, Mac Jones and, Tua going deep, and with Quinn Ewers, just kind of been a lot of attack in the short and intermediate game and focusing on that yards after catch. But we've seen kind of the vintage Steve Sarkisian, at least with, Arch Manning, with him, just chunking the ball down the field and, getting those big chunk plays. So, maybe in 2025, we kind of see for the first time at the University of Texas, that Steve Sarkisian offense where they're just bombs away going down the field repeatedly and consistently every game.
But again, John, I really do want to see, because again, Ewers has the rhythm with the offense. And again, his great big shots are great. We love that. We love to see points being put up in college football, but I really want to see Manning kind of do more of those dump offs. We saw it with Jaydon Blue. They tried that wheel route about 3 times and they weren't able to connect on that. So, too much air on the ball. If Manning just kind of learns to pull back, it won't be biting him in the near future, having to take so many shots and potentially being costly turnovers.
For sure. And I think that just comes with experience. We remember in 2022, Quinn Ewers, wasn't great, or there was a lot of, growing pains. And, now, like you said, he's just poised, one of the best quarterbacks in college football and just kind of understands how to run an offense. And I think Arch Manning, what you're seeing right now is pure talent. And I think eventually he'll grow into learning how to play the quarterback position at the college level. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into our players of the game who really stood out to us in this matchup against Louisiana Monroe. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, bringing Tony Monk back in, talking about our players of the game in units, players, just who stood out to you in this matchup against Louisiana Monroe on Saturday.
Well, I got to look at this game at the point before it got super out of hand. And, we was looking at the depth chart trying to see who was actually in the game at this point for Texas. But I think early in it, defensive end Ethan Burke was really active, John. I like how he was very disruptive on some of those pass plays for UL Monroe. Obviously, he was kind of able to get that sack and everything as well. So I thought he was very good. Leona Leafow, obviously, he finished at the top of the charts as far as tackles. He had the sack. He was very good. Barron Sorrell continues to just play great, really being active on that defense. And just Colin Simmons, the other linebacker. I thought this was probably some of the best linebacker play we've gotten out of Texas as far as this year. And that's saying a lot for a defense that's actually shut everybody down. So my hat's off to a lot of guys on defense. Obviously, Jaydon Blue, 4 touchdowns coming back off of injury. That's huge because who gives their running back 25 carries coming off a lower body injury like that? But Texas did it, and he looked very good.
Yeah, I think there was a question mark, in the Michigan game. He came back in. He was able to make, that crazy juke, had somebody touching earth, you know what I mean? But then he didn't play against UTSA. And so then you wondered, okay, was this just precautionary or, after the adrenaline, went down, is he really hurt? And, we kind of saw that it was precautionary, right? Because he came into this game ready to get a full workload. And I think that was good, for him moving forward, especially in this SEC slate, because you're going to have to lean on, Jaydon Blue, regardless if you have, Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning in there, you're going to need a strong running game. Without Cedric Baxter, Jaydon Blue's really going to have to carry that load. And he showed he could do that, came back very special game, 4 touchdowns. You talked about Ethan Burke. I mean, he was just a monster with his length coming off the edge position. Colin Simmons has been great. The first 4 games of his career. Baron Sorrell was really good. It kind of, and it's very, I want to bring this point up on the podcast. I'm glad you talked about kind of all the edge play, and then, kind of gets tricky sometimes with the linebackers, but they're really playing edge where they're lining up and, all of that.
Right.
But it's really a point that I know sometimes we can look and we look at the sack numbers and we say these guys aren't productive, right? You could watch that game and see how much pressure they were putting on General Booty, right? You know what I'm saying? General Booty was booty in this game because they were putting a ton of pressure on him. So sometimes we can, look too hard at the box score, right? And say, our edges aren't getting home. And, obviously you would like them to get home, because, that, pushes guys back and, that helps stall out drives.
It makes us feel better as a defensive unit when guys are getting home and getting the sack. So
and you're putting them in 2nd and 3rd and long, right? So, I mean, it does, help more, right? It makes it harder for them to convert. But nonetheless, like, pressures are an important stat. They need to start putting pressures in the box score, not just on Pro Football Focus, because it shows you.
No, yeah, that's true. Like, I want to see, and sorry to interrupt, I do want to see Texas start getting home more. I think in which the creative ways they attack teams offensively. We don't have the big names in on defense anymore, but this community of guys that are kind of coming together, and a lot of them being experienced. With the defensive tackles, especially because they're using the rotation much more. Just when you want that inside pressure, you want your defensive ends to kind of be able to get home. I think the way Texas is playing defense is working for them. But again, if we want to sit here and nitpick 51-3 wins, like you always tell me, then we can say we want the sacks. But I would definitely love to see Texas kind of get home.
Yeah, but I think they should start really they should put pressures in the box score. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times these guys don't get enough credit if they don't get the sacks. But when I was watching, I was like, yeah, they're getting a ton of pressure, on General Booty, especially, in the first half. Second half, maybe not so much. Players of the game, I want to go with Anthony Hill. You know what I mean? I've just always talked about, how great he is at the linebacker position. And he didn't have a bunch of tackles in this game, but when you're rotating guys and, getting guys out of there early, that kind of affects the stats. So only 3 tackles, but he had the sack, which was just a really great play where he wasn't even blitzing. You know what I mean? But he was just had his eyes on the quarterback and kind of took off and got him on the ground. Leonga Lafau kind of got a sack in the same manner where, they weren't blitzing, but, just recognized that they could get to the quarterback and then got downhill with their speed and then had the interception, which should have been a pick 6, ticky-tack block in the back call on Trey Moore right by the end zone. I mean, that can we get some home cooking? Can the number one team in the country get some home cooking? Can my boy Anthony Hill get a pick 6, but nonetheless, really good, linebacker play from him. I think him and David Bender have been superstars all season. And now when you move into SEC play, you're going to see them playing the full games, really putting their imprint on the games for sure. So excited to see him the rest of the way in this SEC slate. Came into the season, I think, 3rd team all SEC preseason selection, looking like a first team SEC linebacker right now, all SEC. Colin Page, I want to give some love to the walk-on, right? We talked about Jaydon Blue and, how well he ran the ball. Every time Colin Page gets in the game, he's making plays. You know what I'm saying? I know we got 3-4 running backs ahead of him, but he gets in the game and he's making plays. 10 carries for 60 yards, had his second 20-yard rush of the season. I believe the only running back on the team right now with more than one 20-yard rush, unless Jaydon Blue had more than one on Saturday. I'd have to look. But Colin Page, 2 20-yard rushes this season. He's been really good. And not only has he been effective, coming in when the game is out of hand, he's allowing you to keep your running back room fresh, right? That's one of the biggest question marks on this team. We can't afford another injury. So when you can put a guy in the game like Colin Page, and not only can he be productive, but he can save Jaydon Blue, Trey Wisner, and Jarrett Gibson from absorbing extra hits that could affect them down the road. So really good game from Colin Page. Michael Kern, I wanted to, give some love to the special teams, right? We don't talk about the special teams enough. Obviously, Bert Auburn didn't have to kick any field goals on the day, but he was perfect in terms of his extra points, 7 for 7, I believe. But when you look at it, Michael Kern only had 2 punts on the day, both landing inside the 20, right? And so, that's going to be very important when you get into SEC play, right? When you can pin opposing offenses within the 20 and make them drive the length of the field 80 yards, 75 yards to try to score a touchdown against this defense is going to be really hard. Even if you make them drive 45 to 50 yards to get into field goal range, that's going to be really hard against this defense. When I talked about, we're pretty much top 10 in every metric against the pass, and we can shore up, against the run when we need to. So Michael Kern, giving him some love on the day. Once again, 2 punts on the day, both landing inside the 20. And then I just want to shout out the defense as a whole, right? When we talk about the best defenses, it's not just the defenses that get stops. It's not just the defenses that can prevent yardage, right? It's about turning the ball over, getting the ball back to your offense and giving them more opportunities to put points on the board. Tony, 4 games, a turnover in each game for this defense. They've been absolutely exceptional in the non-conference slate. So I just want to give credit to the defense as a whole for forcing a turnover in the first 4 games. They've been, great for sure. So quick word from our sponsors. Okay, go ahead. My boy Tony jumping back in.
I want to give a shout out to the 11 true freshmen that's been playing for this Texas team, man. Again, it got so deep into the game, you had to wonder who all was playing at this point. But 11 true freshmen, man. Texas has done so great with this recruiting class. Just so great getting these guys on the field, and all of this playing time that they're getting right now is just only going to do wonders, as the season goes on. And my last thing, John, I do wonder how Texas is going to continue to handle and juggle this running back room just to avoid these injuries. That's my only thing with that.
Yeah, for sure. Now you're getting into SEC play. I mean, I know we're 35-point favorites against Mississippi State, which is crazy. But, now you're shoring up that rotation. Right now, it's not going to be 11 true freshmen playing. Now, Colin Page is not going to get a bunch of carries. Yeah. You know what I mean? Things like that. You know what I'm saying? So, the rotation is going to shore up. And, like you said, is Jaydon Blue going to be getting 25 carries? Is it going to be around 17 to 18? We'll just have to see how Steve Sarkisian handles that moving forward. But quick word from our sponsors, and then I get into my Heisman rankings going into week 5 of the college football season. Hold on, y'all. I got to press on the wrong buttons and stuff like I always do. All right, here we go. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by Gametime. I told you I went to the Rangers game on Friday night. 2 tickets for only $46 in section 102. That's the best Gametime app, ad I can give you. The best ad read I can give you, but I'll go ahead and read what they wrote as well. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Some of the best features of the Gametime app: priority Gametime picks. Once again, curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All in pricing, my favorite feature. We talk all the time about how the surprise fees at checkout piss you off. Well, if you toggle this all in pricing feature, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You know exactly how much you're going to pay when you click on your seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee. Your Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. All right, flying solo for the last segment, talking about my top 5 Heisman contenders going into week 5 of the college football season. And as always, we're going 5-1 to create a little bit of suspense. Big shakeup. We have some bye weeks in college football, so a big shakeup in my top 5 Heisman contenders going into next week. And we got a couple non-quarterbacks, right? I always love to get some non-quarterbacks some love in the Heisman rankings because we know this is a quarterback award. Number 5, even though he was on a bye week, I still have him at number 5 right now. Jalen Milroe from Alabama, 746 total yards and 14 touchdowns through only 3 games, right? He's been great. Started off a little bit slow against South Florida, but bounced back with a huge performance against Wisconsin. Like I said, I know he was on a bye week, but there haven't just been a bunch of standout Heisman contenders through the first 4 weeks. Still got Jalen Milroe at number 5, even coming off a bye week this week. Travis Hunter at number 4, making his debut in my Heisman rankings. Travis Hunter, look, over 100 yards per game, 118 receiving yards per game. Matter of fact, oh yeah, and he also plays defense, right? 472 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns through 4 games. Also 2 turnovers forced on defense, including the game-clinching turnover against Baylor on the road where Colorado was down 7 points with like 5 seconds to go, right? So, I mean, just insane play from Travis Hunter through the first 4 weeks. He comes in at number 4 in my Heisman rankings going into next week. Dylan Sampson, Tennessee, number 5 overall in the country now. One of the biggest reasons is their run game. I talked about that infrastructure earlier in the episode, about how, Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava have that great infrastructure around them, whereas Oklahoma, not so much, right? So Dylan Sampson, 519 total yards and 10 touchdowns through the first 4 games, averaging 6.5 yards per carry. I mean, is he running away with the Doak Walker Award at this point? Has to be, right? Best running back in the country thus far. 519 total yards through 4 games and 10 touchdowns. I mean, could he end with 20, 25 touchdowns on the season? Good Lord. Jackson Dart, number 2. Only question mark about Jackson Dart and Ole Miss is the fact they haven't played anybody, right? 3 just super cupcakes, and Wake Forest might be not be a super cupcake, but certainly a cupcake. You know what I mean? Even though they're in the Power 5 or Core 4, I guess, at this point. But Jackson Dart has been amazing. 1,644 total yards and 15 touchdowns on the season through the first 4 games. Now we get to see him in that SEC slate, right? We know Ole Miss is for real. Can Jackson Dart keep up this level of productivity through the next 8 games in the SEC? If he does, I think he'll eventually jump my number 1 candidate for the Heisman. But right now, nobody has done enough. Nobody has done anything to knock Cam Ward out of my number 1 spot. Look, Miami looked like they were struggling at first with South Florida. Maybe it's just South Florida's better than we think, right? Alabama struggles with them, then Miami struggling with them. I'm like, damn, I got to knock, Cam Ward from number 1, maybe to number 2. He's struggling with, USF. And the next thing I look at the score, is 50-15. You know what I mean? And Miami just pulled away from him. Cam Ward has been absolutely exceptional. Like I said, he's been number 1 in my Heisman ranking since he beat Florida in week 1, and nobody has done anything to jump above him just yet. 1,528 yards and 15 touchdowns on the season, 94.4 QBR on the season out of 100. That brother has been absolutely spectacular. So all of these guys have been great. Cam Moore, Jackson Dart, Dylan Sampson, Travis Hunter, and Jalen Milroe. That is my top 5 Heisman candidates going into week 5. Tony, you got anything? I know you don't got your top 5, you know what I mean? But, just who, like right now, snapshot.
I had Jalen Milroe in my 5. I did. I had Jalen Monroe
right now. Who's like just been the most exciting player to you in college football thus far?
It would be Art. No, I'm playing. No, I actually did have Jalen Monroe in my top 5. I thought from what he was doing from last year. Obviously, he had a lot of questionable play last year, and there's a reason why I think Nick Saban might be gone now. But I think he's probably been one of the most exciting players that I had seen, who I was hoping would end up in the Heisman race at some point. Would be Luther Burden III, but he's kind of held back, but a little bit by a little bit what Mizzou is doing offensively. But that Jalen Monroe was one of my guys. When you say him, I was like, great. If anything, I would have probably said him, but that's about it for now.
For sure. So another great episode, another great collab with Tony from Spot on Sports. Once again, he'll be on every Monday throughout the college football season. And, now we're moving into SEC play. This is what we've been waiting for since we made the announcement in 2021 or 2022. It is here on Saturday at 2:15 Central. Texas will play their first SEC game against Mississippi State. And once again, they are 35-point favorites. We don't even know if Quinn Ewers is going to play. They're still 35-point favorites against Mississippi State. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hug 'em. Peace.